Nothing.
Yeah, it's there, but I don't know why. I'm gonna have to start looking into this.
Oh, wait. It says it's live now.
Yeah, well, because I redid the thing.
Oh, you did. Okay. I got all excited for a second. I still don't have a video. It just says that it's live.
Yeah, this is definitely us. Now, how much of a delay is it?
It's usually at least a few, like half a minute.
Yeah, okay. It's about 30 seconds. Okay, well, 46 subscribers? Is that what I see? 45?
Yeah. Isn't that exciting?
Very exciting. I was excited to see Dawn posting today, and she and I talked a little bit.
Yeah.
So she told me I
There
meant to
we
grab.
go. There we go.
She meant to tell. She meant to. I meant to grab the my globe. Remember my silk globe?
Yeah.
Because yes, she's catching up on our back catalog,
Uh-huh.
and she said, "Oh, your silk globe. You got to tell me." And so I told her, and she already knew about it. Like
Mm-hmm.
but she didn't know about the article, I guess. So I sent her a copy of the article. But
Oh,
of course, she then tells me about all these places one can go to see the globe. So I'm like, I got to add more locations to my list of places to go. Luckily, it's in Pennsylvania. So
really?
yeah, the school, apparently the school where those were originally created, the teacher that taught them is a Quaker school that is still, around. I glanced at the website that she sent me. I didn't get a chance to look at it in detail yet, but then she said it's one of the historical societies also has some of the globes.
Mm-hmm.
So they made globe globes, and then they made the terrestrial ones. If you've ever
Oh,
seen those, that look like the stars.
I have not.
Yeah.
Trying to like make you really small so that I can move you around on my screen and like it's not working.
Um, could it be because of oh gosh, I hate that thing. The way I have the settings.
Maybe. Do you have us in a really weird view on Zoom?
I had
No,
gallery.
never mind. It worked. Quiet. We're good now.
I changed it to speaker, and then now I've changed it to gallery.
Nope, you're tiny now. I'm good.
Okay, all good.
Good. All right. All right, let's get this show on the road.
Yeah. Okay,
Hi,
let's see.
Tish. Hi, Robin.
Hey guys.
Robin, you think it's working early? No, trust me.
Yeah, actually, we connected early because it didn't work as usual. So we're
Yeah.
kind of on time when we redid it.
Yeah, I poked Steph at 7:59 and was just like, get started now. And even then it was just a little hiccupy. But eventually it'll be why? It's because we don't have like that 10-minute starting screen
Yeah,
that you
yeah.
have on like Twitch. Yeah.
And
But
we could have that.
no, we could
It's just too much
eventually
effort.
it's just not top stuff. Just getting together is what's number one on my priority list.
Yes.
Everything
And
else is secondary.
yeah, and then just showing up here, like just and continuing the conversation we were having before we went live, and people are like, "What are they talking about?"
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we could put ourselves behind a fancy screen and have those talks, but don't you want to see the weird crap we talk about behind the scenes ahead of time? Hi, Jen. So, before we get going,
Yes.
because you guys were reaching the end of this book, like, here it is. No sooner do we start a book, and I'm like, oh my God, there's so much.
Well,
And
we
then
hit
we
on this
reach
one
the end.
longer than I think any of the other books we've read. This
Yeah,
one,
that's just because it's heavy.
yeah.
So we're reaching the end of that. So we've got to get ready. Yes, Steph already has it in hand. We have to get ready with our next one and get you guys this is a hefty book. It's not necessarily hefty reading per se. It's got a lot of photos. But it is a honker book. Like you will not be disappointed in the encyclopedic knowledge in this book.
Yeah, this, I pulled it out today. I was moving books around this past weekend and I located it. I was like, oh gosh, I gotta find where it is because I frequently look at it. And it was in a stack of books on my cutting table. And so I put it in a prime location so I wouldn't forget where it was. And I pulled it out a few minutes ago, was just flipping through, and I was like, oh, this book is so good. And it's like I've learned so much from it. I have coveted many things in it. I have found some of the things in it, and sometimes I can afford them and sometimes I cannot. So it's at least I have a picture of them. This is a really fantastic book.
Yeah.
And we're not just saying that because the author is our friend, but I bought the book before I knew she was my friend. So I have I guess I have an impartial opinion of the book because, I bought it before Dawn was my friend.
I mean, actually, ditto. I bought this when Dawn and I kind of first met, and we weren't good friends then. And then I just, after kind of looking through it and realizing all these things are in the world, I kind of, just informed her that I was moving into her life, like a cat. And then once I get there, I just kind of become like a barnacle that you can't remove. So I did find out that YouTube hates us putting in links. I have done this thing to get us approval to do links,
Oh,
but
you have that
it's,
permission? Oh,
yeah, it can take up to like 2 months or something. But anywho,
okay.
I have to, one thing to correct. I have been saying that she self-published this book, which is wrong.
Yeah.
Schiffer published this book.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, she started self-publishing. I just assumed it was this one too, because this book, the quality of all of her books are really, really nice. So I just always assumed that they were all self-published.
Yeah.
So yes, this one's Schiffer, but you can get this book directly from her on her Etsy site, autographed. And on Etsy, she's Collector W.A. Needle. I can at least write that in the chat.
I think
Collector
I wrote that last time, but I think when I put a link in the chat last time, it didn't like that.
No,
Although,
it didn't like it.
yeah.
So, get this on her Etsy just because, she does a lot of work herself, and we really want to make sure that we're supporting artists and writers and, people doing stuff, because without them, we don't have any stuff. So, and
And
also she's going to be a guest on a show when we're done with the book. We'll bring her on to interview so you guys can ask questions. You can send questions ahead of time. And she's going to be front and center here on this screen. So you get to talk to her. So.
And I have to show, I'm not going to show too many, but I mean, just the pictures in the book. And this section is about the little sewing rolls, and you might know them as housewives or housewives. I imagine this chapter was so big, that's why she decided to write a book about it, because this whole chapter is like page after page of these beautiful little objects. And that would be my guess that she went, I have a lot of these in my collection. There's a lot of information to learn about these things. How's about I write a book? And yeah, I also saw her lecture about the sewing rolls.
Yeah, the sewing rolls lecture is really good. She's given me some photos that we can use during the stream so that we're not holding up the book. Some really nice done photos. So we'll be able to put that on the screen for people. It's going to be a good time, and it'll be a nice change after reading academic papers. So I'm excited. I'm like, very excited. I'm very excited. I can't wait to ask questions and hear about, her process and what it's like to do those things, and I mean, I collect those things too, but man, does she have a collection.
Yeah, she definitely, I mean, well, what I always say to people when I get excited about their collections or whatever, and I say, oh, I guess I'm a baby collector, or I don't have as much stuff or whatever. And they always tell me, you just haven't been around long enough to collect as much. And I'm just like, oh, okay. All right. We're going to do the age thing, but okay. And I'm not saying that Donna said that, but when you've been focused on collecting for a while, you do end up having more
No,
and nicer
I'm
stuff.
pretty sure she's said something of that variety
But
over the
you
years.
have been collecting longer than I have. You have more and nicer stuff than I do because my
I don't
collection.
know that it's necessarily collecting longer. I might have just been collecting harder.
There you go.
Like when I still worked for Kohl's, I definitely collected more often. I will say, being a dealer, I'm actually not collecting as much because I find that the thrill of going out and buying them, I get when I shop for the store. So there's less of that. But anywho, thank you so much, Robin, for
Yeah,
telling
I was
everyone to
yeah,
hit the
I
like
was
button. You're like the best cheerleader ever.
yes, thank you, Robin. I was about to say, Robin remembers to say, hit that like button,
Mm-hmm.
follow. What is it?
Follow, subscribe, make sure you turn on your notifications. All those things help the algorithms and things like that.
There's a couple
So,
of channels I watch that always say consensually smash that like button. And I'm like, ew.
consensually smash the like button.
I don't think we're ever gonna say that, but the
Like,
sentiment is
I feel like that like needs like a sticker, like, ow, consensually smash that like button. Um, all right.
okay.
Anywho, so
Let's talk
for
about Cuesta.
next
Oh,
week,
yeah. We finished this book next week.
yes, next week, which will be April 2nd, we will finish the last section of this book, which is Shifting Functions, Quilt Makers in the 20th Century, with the blurb. The 20th century has witnessed the recognition of individual quilters as artists, the expansion of quilting events from a local to a larger audience, and the shift from making quilts solely as bed covers to a greater emphasis on the reflection of personal achievement. Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, and I think I've been excited about every single section we've read for some reason or another, but this next section is not only Joyce Gross and Betts Ramsey's papers, but just flipping through, I noticed there's some Florence Petto stuff, there's some Emma Andre stuff, so it's things that I know I've always been obsessed with. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
excited for those papers.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Interesting. Robin said she's been hearing that some YouTube streamers are losing subscribers, even though people think they're subscribed. Make sure to do a double check. So, Robin, that's not just YouTube. That's also an Instagram thing. I think it's a generalized streaming social media algorithm kind of like reckoning that's going on where things are getting changed, shifted around,
yeah.
updated, moved, the this, the that. So just as like a general statement, if there's people out in the social interwebs that you connect with, that you love, that you're not seeing very much anymore, search them out again and make sure that everything is as it should be. Because it's a big issue going on. Yeah, Robin, for reals. For reals.
Yeah, and I mean, I have to say, like, the algorithm is so confusing. And we always joke around about feeding the algorithm, but
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we have our small group of friends that we talk to regularly, sometimes actually see in person. And so we can always let them know, but you have to feed the algorithm to let other people know what you're up to. And I mean, even people that we talk to frequently sometimes miss. I mean, I think my mother has gotten unsubscribed to something and she's like, I didn't know you were live. And I was like, well, because you didn't have I don't know, the follow button. I don't know.
Well, and that's why, like, our cheerleaders, like everyone in the chat, but especially Robin and people like Druid and Eva and just the people that are the big cheerleaders, like, very much appreciated. We couldn't like do this stuff without you.
And I
Especially
have to, yeah, I also have to say the same for Jen because Jen was at the Baltimore Applique Society meeting and was talking about our stuff. So everybody's out there spreading the message and we appreciate it.
yes, cheerleaders are important. Very, very important. So thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
All right,
Well,
let's get
let's get to
going.
it. Miss Questa Benberry.
You were really excited for this article. And I have to say, I wasn't necessarily excited for it, but I really enjoyed this article.
Mm-hmm. I thought it was really good.
I didn't realize how little knowledge I had about quilt cottage industries.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, did she just rattle them off there.
Yeah, she did. And you know, I think a lot of them she talked about I was already familiar with, but I really did not know the backstory. You
Hmm.
know, the fact that it's the one I did a terrible job of marking my my chapter again, but
Story of your life.
yeah. So Freedom Quilting Bee, of course, I'm getting ready
Hmm.
to read that book. For those of you that don't follow my stream, I am getting ready to read this book, but not on the stream.
What is
So
that book?
Nancy Callahan's Freedom Quilting Bee book. It
Oh.
talks a lot about civil rights. It's a really, really interesting book. And I started reading it and I was like, oh, this is something that I know a lot of people need to hear. So I'm doing something like behind a paywall. There's some copyright concerns there.
Hmm.
So I didn't want to put it out on my stream. You know, I don't want to have it like snatched away. So
Hmm.
but yeah, the Freedom Quilting Bee I knew about. And Mountain Artisans, that's one, I mean, that's fairly close to me. I'd heard of that one, Cabin Creek Quilters. The other ones, Dakota Handicrafts and Grassroots Craftsmen. Um, let's see, Grassroots was in Jackson, Kentucky, but Dakota was in South Dakota. So those two I wasn't as familiar with, but um yeah, the whole idea, I mean, I just kind of always thought of these things as starting up just because women wanted to, you know, have an income stream. And I think that's the way some of the cottage industry started. But then these co-ops were, you know, I didn't realize that the ones in the 60s came about from Lyndon Johnson's initiatives,
Hmm.
which I think came out of the Kennedy administration. Um, so yeah, and I was like, I don't want to, I don't say pleased is not the right term for it, but I was happy to see that she covered the Smithsonian controversy.
I that came out of left field
Yes,
for
I
me
did.
at the
Yeah,
very
I
end. I
did
was just
not
like,
expect that at
whoa.
all. Yeah, I didn't expect it at all, but I'm glad she talked about it because, you know, I mean, it is one of those things that the overseas quilts absolutely impact cottage industry in the United States. You know,
Hmm.
and then I mean, this is something that I think I've mentioned it before. Sam Hunter is a quilter and a pattern maker, pattern designer. I think she's out in Oregon, but she does a big thing about, you know, getting paid what you're worth if you make quilts and sell them or design patterns and sell them, whatever. She talks a lot about this. And I mean, this is something that we continue to deal with today is, you know, as quilters, we understand when somebody makes a quilt, the effort and time they put in it, the materials, all that stuff. And so, you know, if somebody says to me, I've got this quilt I made and I'm selling it for, you know, thousands of dollars, I don't blink because I'm like, yeah, I know. But most people that have never put needle and thread together don't get that, you know, and so we still deal with this. And it's so interesting. And I guess when she talks about, you know, kind of like the rise and the fall, I mean, it's clear what happened on both ends of that, but it's something that I had just really never looked at or, you know, thought much about. Um, so yeah, this was such a
I was actually like generally, well, there's a couple things. So I general statement. I was actually more pleasantly surprised at some of the general cost of what they were charging for things.
Mhm,
Just because, for example, so like around $30
mhm,
was popping up a lot. So $30 in like the 19 like 20s was
mhm.
equivalent to $486 today.
Yeah.
So yay on that front.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um and because I mean God, when I see people talking now about that whole like what should I charge for a quilt and they feel like if they make a baby quilt, well they're the people that look at them are going to argue and be like, well, that's not a whole lot, I can get that at Walmart for $50, so they feel that they have to price it at $50, which is like, and it probably costs them a minimum of 200 to make, just time and material.
Mhm.
um
Yep.
so I was pleased with that. I also had never known, I'd never heard of this Society of Blue and White Needlework of Deerfield, Mass.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Um,
I was gonna ask you about that.
so so you've heard of like Sturbridge Village, right? Where
Mhm,
you can, you know, they do that like living history museum stuff.
mhm,
So there's kind of an equivalent of that in Deerfield, which is further west. Um, it's it's kind of like a middle of nowhere kind of town. There's some decent antiquing out there. They do have some museums. There's also a historic Deerfield antique show. I have never gone to these things. Just because it's kind of a pain in the butt to get to. It's far out there.
Yeah.
I would need to commit a little better. But after reading, I was like, oh my God. And I'm sure like somebody's gonna come up here and be like, you knew about that because remember blah 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 blah. Um, so
But there's so many
knowing
things
this,
to know about. You
yeah.
know?
So like knowing this, I was like, oh, I guess I need to put a little more effort into going to those places. Um, and learning about those things. But then after reading all of this, I almost feel like there were so many of these groups that I just feel like it's more likely that everywhere had one most because they're just like they were
Yeah.
just everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Two things. One is something I should have known. But the one thing, and this is kind of just a very minor thing, she keeps talking about the Southern Highlands. And I'm like,
Mhm.
what is she talking about?
I kept thinking about Scotland.
Well, exactly. I mean, and you've got the Highlands and the Lowlands of Scotland. And interestingly enough, when I've my ancestry goes up to the Scottish Highlands. It's surprisingly not where I thought it was. It's over on another side of my family. The poor ones. So, um, but she's just talking about Appalachia.
Mm.
I
Oh,
was thinking like maybe she means like the southern and eastern mountains, because that would include like the Ozarks, and but she specifically, well, based on what I researched, I looked there, it's a Western North Carolina. I think it might have been a college or something had a piece about it. And they said that Southern Highlands just refers to the Appalachian mountain range. So that was interesting, but I'm just like, I wonder why she's using that terminology, like where that comes from, because I had just never heard it. And I mean, I've got a good number of relatives from there.
mhm.
So I'm just wondering if it was like in academic circles or something that was using, or this is this just an outdated term I'm not familiar with. I was gonna ask Mary Kay because she was good friends with Cuesta. So
Yeah,
um
I have not heard that. Even
yeah.
going to school in North Carolina, did I never hear any of that?
Right.
But
Um
also you have to consider too, this we're also dealing with an article written in the
in the
80s.
80s, right. Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. Like again, like it was it a term that back then was more prevalent. Now it's just referred to Appalachia. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing that I feel like I should have known, and as I thought about it more, I feel like maybe I have heard this before. Not so much with the cottage industries of quilting, but with home piecework, because my mom did piecework for a while just to make us, extra money, that the garment workers unions, the women's
Mm-hmm.
garment workers unions were like, and I understand where they're coming from, but also, you know, the cooperative, the efforts of these cooperatives, I think really were important for some women, to be able to make, even if it was just a little bit of money on their needlework from home, raising children, caretaking, whatever they did, they could do this work from home, or from a low. I think the G's Bend, they definitely had like a facility that they went to, but um, yeah, I mean it's just one of those things like, you look at unionized labor versus kind of that hustle mentality and I mean, again, something we deal with now.
Mm-hmm.
There's the unions, there's the full-time jobs, there's the corporations, there's the people, doing hustle culture and trying to work a bunch of different part-times. And we still have these same conversations about pay and what's right and what's wrong and et cetera, et cetera.
I have to say that reading this now and the things that are going on now,
Mhm.
I feel it made me feel like a positive turnabout had happened because like in the on page 153 about the Freedom Quilting Bee, the Freedom Quilting Bee went from an annual sale of 400 quilts and an income from their Sears contract to a low of 8 quilts a year and the expiration and non-renewal of the Sears contract. So to know where they are right now, getting example like um their Target contract and
Mm-hmm.
all the posting they've done about like what that's done. Just the
Mm-hmm.
contract alone has brought in all this extra work and requests, for quilts and things, and like knowing kind of the injustices that have been done to them in the
Mm-hmm.
past.
Yeah.
I like to
Well,
know that we at least know about like one really good story that came out for something later, at least compared to that for sure.
mhm. Well, yeah, and I had heard about, the Sears contract. I think Sears like the idea of a cottage industry of this co-op. It wasn't really what they made. It's the fact that they existed and were making something. And I had
Mhm.
heard about they were just given like reams of corduroy. And it was stuff like they wanted them to make things I think that wasn't like their signature sort of.
No, it was just corduroy pillow shams.
Yeah, yeah. And then you've got all of the offshore stuff going on that I think, yeah. And it's funny, like so I guess back in 2009 when the Modern Quilt Guild became a thing, and that's probably when, I mean, I had made quilts before then, but that's probably when I kind of reignited my interest in making quilts.
Hmm.
And somewhere along in there, I mean, I've drafted a few patterns, I've done a few things for small applique stuff. And I mean, it's challenging to make those things, but essentially, if you make one quilt and people like it and it's unique and you pattern it and then you teach other people how to make it, you never have to sell that quilt. you know, you never, and I think so many designers and teachers, that's the route they go because nobody could ever afford to buy the item. So they tap into the other creative people and not so much people that want to own that item, but people that would want to make that item for themselves. And, and I see that as like where cottage industry went, you know?
Hmm.
And there was one place in here where she talked about, and I didn't mark it, of course, I'm never gonna find it, but it was about the one woman that started, was this she? Oh, no. It was one of the women who she basically basted appliques and sold the
Hmm.
blocks. And that is what Baltimore album quilt researchers suspect might have been happening in Baltimore because the people that have studied, I by no means am a Baltimore album quilt scholar. I've just what I've come upon, in my studies. But people that have really, really looked at a lot of Baltimore album quilts and the ones that are, they know the names and all that stuff, putting them side by side, they can tell like certain blocks or certain whole quilts like match each other. And it's like, why? And so they have finally come to the conclusion that there was this cottage industry going on in Baltimore where possibly Mary Simon, this immigrant, like came to Baltimore and was like, heck yeah, I'm gonna get my album quilting on. And she and maybe some neighbors or women she hired were doing this. They were creating blocks, either ready-made, completely made that they could just sell, or like all cut and ready to be appliqued.
Hmm.
And I guess like I was surprised not to see that in here, but also I feel like maybe that has been a more recent sort of like discovery or assumption
Hmm.
than this. Because it I guess so which this book I know when I was reading in here, I was like, wait a minute, she mentioned the 1990s. When was this book written? I wanted okay, so 94. So I think her epilogue to this was probably concurrent in with the book. So 1994-ish is when she wrote that. And I think that's when she says in here, in the interim between the early 80s and early 90s, many of the quilt cooperatives ceased operations. So, I mean, she's up to the minute in 94, I think, with this.
Jen said in with the Highland terms that she worked on a policy report that used Southern Highlands as a term. It's used in regional property studies in the US. Google persistent property in Southern Highlands. The
Persistent
more you know.
That's interesting. That is so interesting. Like I had like literally as I'm reading it, I had never heard that term before.
No,
And
me
I
either.
guess I'm not reading the right reports and studies. Oh, that's interesting. So yeah, there was something else in here that, oh, if I could ever find one of these quilts,
I think so. I think I have one. I
do
think
you?
I have one by her. It's not this. It's not this Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah, the Alice in Wonderland one is the one that I'm just like, oh,
I do have a Alice in Wonderland that might be one of hers. Um, but I have one that's Snow White and it's just the Seven Dwarfs.
and that's in your collection. That's not your
No, no,
inventory.
no, that's in my inventory.
You do have it in your inventory?
Yeah.
Okay. Ooh.
And the way that this is rendered and the description of how she does things makes me wonder if it's one of hers, because it is also very plain except for the applique.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I actually had thought like maybe I should take a picture of it beforehand, but I wouldn't have been able to get good lighting for it. The other thing too is did you peep in here on 150 under that first column that there is an Alice in Wonderland um hold on. Oh yeah, this Alice in Wonderland quilt is owned by the Met.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw that.
Um
And it's funny, you'll notice that I have a flag on this book, and that was from when I very first bought this book and flipped through it and went, oh. So yes, I've been coveting this quilt since long before I even read this paper.
have I ever showed you my Alice in Wonderland quilt in my collection?
Yes, I think you
Oh.
did a quilt turning way back on Quilt Nerd, and I think you had it in that batch. I do remember it.
Did I have it in that batch? Huh. Okay.
Yeah, I think so. I think I remember it from them. So
I'm
yeah,
sure Robin will pop up and be like, "Yeah, I was there." Like,
Robin remembers all the episodes. But yeah, the other thing that I thought was pretty cool as I was flipping through here, I was recognizing a lot of the names of things, like Mary McElwain's studio and those kind of things, and Marion Cheever from Dr. Dutton's collection. He has a lot of the little booklets from, these, the ones that were prevalent in the 20s and 30s. So,
mhm.
Obviously he doesn't have G's Bend because he was dead
Well,
by
I
then.
mean, like, just even when you first the front cover there with all the booklets,
Mhm.
again, more ephemera that I'm like, good God. I normally like for the last year-ish, 2 year, I don't know. I just when I've gone out longer than that actually, when I've gone out, antiquing, I've not paid attention to the ephemera bins anymore because I used to pay attention to them when my studies were religious material culture. Um, and here I am going like, I don't need to look at those. Like I'm looking, for quilts. They're like out in the open. They're easier to find. And I'm looking for needlework tools. They're in the cases. And here I am going, I should have been rifling through those bins all along because who knew that there was all this important stuff
Yeah,
hanging
yeah, and
out in there?
I'm wondering, how prevalent is it out there? I feel like when I've purchased, lots of stuff, from eBay or at auctions, I'll sometimes find, and not need these necessarily, but sometimes find the little booklets, ephemera and stuff.
Mhm.
But yeah, I see this stuff on eBay. Like people know what this stuff is
Oh
for.
yeah, yeah, on eBay for sure.
Yeah.
But like there is I know I've said this to you before, Steph, but I don't know if I've said it to the group. There is a an ephemera show that comes to
Yeah.
Boston. I think it comes to New York.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if they're the same shows, but I've been to it before. It's very large. And again, I went to it back when I studied religious material culture and I would collect antique religious texts and things like that. So now I'm kind of like, wow, maybe I should go and like see if there's like quilt needlework, type
Yeah,
stuff.
that would be interesting to know if they have. Gosh, think of the stories we've heard about, women that for years and years and years collected clipped the Kansas City Star quilt blocks and stuff and saved every single one, and then they pass away and they're, either their their family or somebody at the estate sale finds this, gorgeous box or binder or folder or something of all of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think that those kind of things are, they're probably rare to find that, but it's also like jackpot. I've heard of people that have done that. So the Romance of the Village quilts, Jen, I'm pretty sure Dr. Dutton has a copy of that, I think. Next
Well,
time I'm there.
she can't have it if he
I
does.
know, but I can take nice pictures of it for her so she knows what's in there. See, that's to me, that's the second best. To have looked at the thing, to have paged through it, to take good pictures of it. And then if you can't ever find one, you at least have some pictures of it.
Well, it would be cool. It would be cool to find some of these things, or I guess, like you said, good pictures. And we can look through them on here. Cause like I'm thinking, like, remember when I went not too long ago and I had gotten that copy of Modern Priscilla that
Yes.
had that ad in it about
That was an article about occupational therapy.
yeah, there was that. But then there was that little ad in there that I shared about, oh my God, what was it about? It was like, it was really silly. And I found it really silly. And I had posted it. I had posted it for people to get a kick out of. But you know, like looking through stuff like that. Or what was that other one that was big at the time? Work Basket.
Work
Um,
basket. Oh, what's the other one? Is it needlework or needlework arts? I can't remember. I feel like I have a couple of copies of every single one of those magazines.
well, that's what I mean. Like we could be Robin left us to switch the laundry. Get your priorities in order.
How dare.
Um, oh yes, but she does. Oh, she doesn't remember the Alice quilt. You might be wrong.
But I'm pretty sure I'm right. I don't know.
I mean, there would be a way to check.
Yeah. I think it was a tier 2 thing.
Oh no, it was a private YouTube stream.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, what's that thing? I know. Oh, here it is. Okay, so it was advertising a book of 450 designs. So it was called, the ad said every quilter, and it had a basket quilt design. And it said every quilter should have our book of 450 designs containing the prettiest, queerest, scarcest, most grotesque patterns.
That's right. I forgot about the most grotesque.
Yeah, the most grotesque. From old log cabin to stars and puzzle designs to introduce this wonderful 25-cent book and catalog of beads and needlework material. We'll mail both for 20 cents, no stamps. And it's our cross-stitch book of over 100 designs and above. It's Ladies Art Company, St. Louis, Missouri.
I truly want one of the most grotesque. Oh my God, that's too funny.
Look at Robin trying to make the peacemaker here. She thinks you're right, but she just doesn't remember.
So one thing I wanted to note before we move on to the next thing is that one of our friends on Discord sent me a listing today on eBay of Dr. Dunton's book, Old Quilts, a Xerox copy of it. And the description of it is something to the effect of, this is a rare book. And although this is only a photocopy, it is better than nothing.
What was it selling for?
$25.
Oh, that's fair. I thought you were going to
shipping.
say like it's a photocopy and they still want $500 for it.
Now, and you know, the thing is, if I hadn't been able to find a copy of the book, you know, and multiple opportunities have come since then, but I would probably have bought that just to know what was in the book, because it really was hard to find in the beginning. And periodically, you know, I see copies come up for sale. But I just thought that was funny. I was like, this is a rare book and this is only a photocopy, but that's better than nothing.
You can like absorb the rare essence through the photocopy, even if you can't touch the real book.
Oh my gosh. I also wanted to mention this. The poinsettia quilt, that is a Merriam-Webster, and that was one I wasn't familiar with.
I don't think I've ever seen that quilt.
Yeah, I have both of the books that her granddaughter wrote, and I don't remember this being in there. If it's in one of them, I missed it. But yeah, most of her stuff I feel like are springy flowers, you know, the tulips and the, you know, all that stuff. And then, you know, this one is very Christmassy. And then the fact that because at first I was like, oh, I wonder if this is somebody remade it, and it appears to be. I mean, it's. Oh, I guess it wasn't made by Merriam-Webster. It's just the design. Because I was like, I never seen that she used striped fabric and anything. That's pretty cool. But I guess it's yeah, it sounds like it was their gift of somebody who maybe was a family that made it. So shall we move on to the
Oh,
money?
and it also mentions in there that her patterns were widely publicized in Ladies' Home Journal. That's another one.
Yes, Ladies' Home Journal was probably one of the most common ones I think that I've seen things clipped out of.
Yeah, well, that's
Um,
what I mean. Like there were multiple mentions in here of
mhm,
those different
yeah. Well,
publications.
so Marie Webster, Anne Orr, and then later on Florence Petto, they all kind of had an in with a number of those magazines. And Ladies' Home Journal was one of the ones that was very commonly that they were in there.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I think Anne Orr, um, it mentioned she had, I think it was rugs. Yeah, that one was Good
Oh,
House.
it was like a quilt and rug to match or something.
Yeah, that was Good Housekeeping. Dr. Dutton has that article in his scrapbook. And then the Ladies' Home Journal stuff that Florence Petto did, he has in there too. And then I think Ladies' Home Journal was Marie Webster stuff too. Because Marie Webster did the quilt, and then later on she came out with these cushions that were
Mm-hmm.
like matched the quilt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
ready
I
to
have to say it was a very informative article.
it was a good
Yeah.
one. It
Yeah.
was a good one.
All
And
right, moving on.
last week I complained, I was like, oh gosh, it's long. But
Yeah, it is
it
long.
was getting to the epilogue when I was like, this was long, but I didn't notice that it was long, you know? Um, so first of all, this picture, this quilt is so cool.
Yeah, I thought I it I've never seen anything like it.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I look at it, it looks like something different.
Mm-hmm.
Like I at first I kind of saw like the lotusy flowers, but then like the base of it, the pad,
Mm-hmm.
almost looks like a child's booty.
Yeah, it is kind of weird looking, but where it's stitched with like the veins of the leaf, it looks
Yeah,
better.
yeah.
I think some of them, the leaves they're stitched with like such a matching thread, it's hard to see. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I just thought I'd never seen one like with so much color. This is
Mm-hmm.
so colorful. And then, I mean, not to skip ahead, but there's the Sunbonnet Sue one that's very colorful. But all the ones,
Which they're calling
the
Little
Dutch,
Dutch Girl.
yeah, Dutch doll. I don't think she became Sunbonnet Sue until later.
Oh,
Um,
really?
yeah, I
Oh.
think that, there's the Sunbonnet Babies reference, but that version, I think she was called Dutch Doll regionally. Um, but anyway, the quilts that I've run into in the wild that were fundraising quilts, I think have almost all been like red and white. And those must be the early 20th century ones where it was really popular. She talked about the wheel, and she talked about red work, like embroidering red work. And I saw a quilt. It was probably last year before last, at this little shop in kind of near where my in-laws live. And I'm kicking myself for not buying the fundraising quilt that they had. And I can't remember, I think it was a church quilt. It was a church fundraiser. But it was so cool. And it was not, I mean, let's see, where's the quilt that's on page 160? That's like when you look at it, it's just like all text. Wasn't quite like that, but it was
Mm-hmm.
that kind of dense. Like there were some wheels, I think, but then there were some blocks that weren't. There were some blocks that were like more artistically designed of the text.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm still kicking myself for not buying that quilt because it wasn't, I mean, it was pricey, but it
I guess
wasn't.
now I'm gonna have to kick you too.
Yeah. I keep having this dream like maybe they still have it. I kind of doubt it. Um, oh, Sunbonnet Stew first began to be used in the Depression era of the southern part of the US. The pattern was also referred to as Dutch doll until the 70s. Yeah. I mean, I think I see them interchangeably now.
Mm-hmm.
People on eBay, they use both.
Well, and my guess is that depending on who you're dealing with on eBay, they also say it's really rare.
It's rare. It's oh
It's
gosh, what's the
Lancaster blue.
it's Lancaster blue. It's an Amish Mennonite quilt, but it's also a cutter. You should see the text Jill and I send back and forth. Like, can you believe this? Tell me how this is a cutter quilt. Tell me.
Um, wow. I was gonna say that's probably the tamest of the texts, but
Um, so I thought this was I mean, I guess I just always thought of like quilt fundraising, church fundraisers particularly as just sort of being like, the ladies made a quilt, they sold off spots for the signatures and they raffled it off and blah, you know. But reading in here all of the different decisions that are made and the fact that there really, there were specific quilts, that the circle thing, and then this one, this Irish chain, I think is probably was pretty common, I guess, maybe the early days. And then there's the one, I think, is it the chimney sweep pattern that was often used to put signatures in the center?
Yeah, album block. Yep.
And I guess there was a lot more, thought to it than I just really, I mean, not to disparage the makers of these quilts, but I was just kind of like, I thought it was no big deal. But they really put a lot of like forethought into how they created these. And I thought it was especially interesting when they didn't want to let them go. I feel like I too would have probably been like, if I had done a good job on this quilt, embroidering names or whatever, I would probably be a little bit like, I don't want anybody to have this quilt either.
No, because that's such customizable work that you've done. If you're embroidering John Smith's signature, there's going to be no other quilt in the world that will be embroidered in the same way with his signature, because if someone else embroiders it, it's going to be different.
Yeah, and where is in here where she says, let's see. One woman told me that the woman who won such a quilt had only one ticket. So she was lucky. She only bought one raffle ticket and she won versus the people that bought like 50 and were like, oh.
I have totally been that person.
Yes. The one ticket person or the 50 ticket person?
No, the 50 ticket person. My friend Patty, if you're out there, Patty, hi. She her guild a couple of years ago made a quilt that just, oh my God, it was just amazing. And I wanted that sucker so bad that even friends of ours were buying raffle tickets and putting my name on some of them. Like, I wanted it so hard. Half of me was like, we should have gone through and counted how many tickets actually had my name on it. But it was at more than 50, because I'm pretty sure I'd bought tickets more than once, and I think it was about 50. And I did not win. I'm pretty sure that quilt that raised some heck of money for them, because it was just beyond.
Well, and so what the woman had said that, the woman had bought one ticket and then she didn't take care of the quilt. And I think about these, these church fundraisers, the quilt guilds typically are, guild members are talking to their friends and family who hopefully appreciate quilts. Or you go to a quilt show and they have the raffle quilt and you're only at the quilt show because you appreciate quilts. So I feel like if in that case, I guess I would be less bothered by somebody, winning a quilt that I had a hand in making that way versus the church where it could literally be anybody and they're putting money in because they're like, oh, well, it benefits the church. So of course I'll give money. Oh, I won this quilt, and it's like, I understand.
If only people like that had the gunboat quilts mentality where they were like, oh, I won, raffle it again,
Yeah.
Yeah, to go back to our discussion of eBay stuff, Jen says she's convinced they use the term cutter because they see it in other listings and think it will help the quilt sell. Jen, 100%, because they're trying to attract people that repurpose quilts, because those people buy, I can speak from personal experience, they buy a lot of quilts.
Oh, speaking of, oh my God, did I totally forget to bring that up, to go back to Cottage Industries?
Oh yeah, the pillows.
That one. And the interesting thing is, where is it in here?
It's like towards the end.
She says the company was called Hands All Around. She only talks about it in this one paragraph. Some of the cut up quilts were advertised as dating from 1850 and earlier. Yeah. Doesn't that make your stomach hurt? I'm like, oh no.
Well, keep in mind, did it say when they were operating?
1970s.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, because if it was some of the other cottage industries that were starting in like 20s, that wouldn't seem so hurtful to
No,
them.
no, it was because it was in the 70s. And I was
Yeah.
thinking, well, you know, the 70s and 80s, I think, is when Ralph Lauren did the quilted blazers. I think that was the 80s. So yeah, I mean, there's precedents before that. But I was like, when I saw that name, I'm like, oh, I've never heard of them. I have to check into that and find out the details.
And then the whole thing about like it was people owning some of that history.
Hmm. Yeah, you know, and on one hand, I'm like, yeah, I guess I can appreciate that whole owning some of history if that's the reason why you bought it. But if you bought it just because, well, this is a cool coat made out of a quilt. Oh, I don't even want to get on the quilt coat thing.
Mm-hmm.
Don't start me, you guys.
Okay, then don't get on it. Come back. Come back to come back to fundraisers.
Um, Methodists. What's up with the Methodists, you guys? Anybody here a Methodist or practicing Methodists? Like, why are the Methodists the ones that seem to make more of the quilts, the fundraiser quilts than other denominations? I thought that was interesting. And now I mean
I have nothing to offer
I don't either.
that question.
And I try to think about it. Like, I know like the whole issue of gambling, raffle gambling, like, that's kind of always been an issue with church fundraisers. I feel like in today's day and age, I see a lot of different denominations of churches doing, fundraising raffle, kind of like basket bingo, that kind of stuff. Or I don't know, maybe that's the fire stations. But anyway, I see these kind of things more often, whereas I do think there was a time in the 20th century, I don't know where this sentiment necessarily was coming from, but I remember hearing this kind of stuff when I was a kid about places, just not wanting to do any kind of raffle or fundraiser because it was gambling. And so I'm wondering, I mean, maybe the Methodists don't feel it's gambling. I don't know. Like, yeah, I'm wondering. The Methodists also did a lot of
Also did a lot of the album quilts for
Yeah,
ministers.
they did. In fact, I think I have a book that's about the circuit riders, and they were Methodist. So I'm guessing maybe it's coming from there. They made those group quilts a lot for their pastors, and maybe they thought, oh, we're putting all this effort into these quilts. Why don't we get the congregation to pitch in the money to make the quilt? We'll still give it to the pastor. And then eventually it became something they could raffle. Yeah.
Speaking of, do you have this book that she mentions, a century of fundraising quilts?
I don't. Yeah.
I have never heard of that book.
Yeah.
Half of me thinks that maybe I should look and see if the library has it tomorrow.
Oh yeah, let me know.
Um,
I haven't really been looking at the bibliographies and
no,
maybe,
it's mentioned
yeah.
in
Yeah,
like one of the picture.
I do remember seeing it when I was scanning over stuff, but yeah, I've specifically not looked at bibliographies because like I do not need to know about any quilt books I don't have.
Well, I'm gonna text you the name of this book just so I can remember it tomorrow.
Okay. Also, I have to mention with the Little Dutch Girl fundraiser quilt, as I read this, it said made by the Women's Society of Christian Service of the Turkey, North Carolina, United Methodist Church. And I'm like, the Christian Service of the Turkey. What? And I think this was like an editorial issue here because I think there is a place called Turkey, North Carolina, and I'm pretty sure it's near Mount Olive, I believe, home of the famous Mount Olive pickles. But I think that's what this means. It's the Women's Society of Christian Service of the Turkey, North Carolina, United Methodist Church.
Your way is better though.
Yeah, the Society of Christian Service of the Turkey. I was like, oh, wow. And I Googled it, and I was like, the only thing that came up was like Christian missionary work in the country of Turkey. And I was like, no, but maybe in 1950. I mean, I don't know like what was going on like in the Middle East in the 50s. Like maybe they were supporting some kind of Christian mission, but in North Carolina and Turkey, like, and then I Googled and I was like, there's a Turkey, North Carolina. That's what this is.
I might consider joining a church of the Turkey.
I'm not a very religious person, but if anybody knows of a church where you're involved with turkeys, then I'll consider.
I also found this interesting that on 158, it talks about how like beginning in 1890, the names, addresses, and even slogans of businesses in the community began to appear on fundraisers.
And I
Now,
think,
the concept of that isn't weird to me because like we have that now.
mhm,
But I feel like the concept of that then seems weird just
back then.
I really haven't seen much of that. It's always seems to be people.
Well, I think that quilt that I saw, I want to say there was some business stuff on it.
Why do you just ruin everything? Like why can't I just trust you to make good decisions when you're out in the world on your own?
I bought a different quilt, so sue me. I had to decide between which one.
When was that?
I think it was about a year ago. Yeah. I was
And
on
what
my
were they
own.
where were you again?
In Western Virginia, in Gordonsville. You know where Folkling is?
Oh, is that the new store that I sent you to?
Yes, actually. Yeah.
And what were they asking for it? Do you remember?
I don't remember, but I want to say it was up around 500.
Mm-hmm.
But for what and the thing is, I looked at it and I thought, oh, how cool. And then I looked at the price and I'm like, well, I don't have $500 right now for a thing I don't collect. So I
So
went
I
with,
feel like maybe you might
yeah,
have sent me pictures of it back then.
I
Because you
might
did
have.
send me a bunch of pictures. Guys, for just some backstory, it's not Folkling that we're talking about. It's a different store that
Mhm.
opened. Steph was going to be in the area. I sent it to her. I'm like, hey, this store is opening up. You should go check it out. It was another quilt dealer, very nice person that we chatted with and everything. And Steph sent me some pictures. But I'm wondering if maybe if we reached out, if the bare minimum, she would take pictures of it for us, if she still has it.
Well, my husband is in the area.
Can he be trusted?
No, he cannot. He can be trusted less than I can. So, yeah, I have to swing by there again soon.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, it was a cool store. Her pictures and stuff
yeah.
online, right?
If anybody is in passing through the western part of Virginia, it's in Gordonsville, Virginia, which is, oh, I don't know, 20-30 minutes from Charlottesville. And the little shop is called Weaver
Hmm.
Street Shops.
They're
So,
on Instagram too. The I don't
mhm,
remember her name, but the woman that runs it's very lovely.
yeah, she's very nice.
Hmm.
Um,
The other thing that I thought that was really interesting on 159, during the 1880s, it became popular to write to famous people asking for pieces of their clothing to be used in crazy quilts. I I have never heard of that.
I have not either. And yes, I did catch that and I was like, that is insane. Um, but people did stuff like that though. I mean, you think there was that woman that wrote, I don't know, tons and tons of people to get their signatures for a quilt she made.
Yeah, I
Um,
do remember that. But
and
that seems far more
yeah.
like
Can you
normal
cut
person
the
to do
pocket off your
that.
shirt and send it to me?
Yeah, like because you remember, like I remember as a kid, like, and they even had it far before my childhood. The signature autograph books.
Yeah, I had one of them a little.
So yeah, so I had one for Disney. Um,
I think mine was Snoopy.
yeah, so I can totally see people doing that, but just like, and what if you get that facetious person that like writes you back and you're like, well, here's a clipping from my boxer briefs, like.
Well, in the 1880s, I guess it'd be from my union suit, from the trap door of my long underwear.
Yeah, like here are my trousers.
I mean, that is pretty weird. I found a little cartoon though. It was very, very early on when I was researching. I think it was even before my Dr. Dutton research. I think I was just researching like newspaper quilts and or the, Nancy Page and Nancy Cabot stuff. But I remember finding a little cartoon, and I want to say it was probably the 19 teens or 1920s at the latest. And it was a little cartoon about this woman that she's like, oh, should I ask him? Oh, I have this important question to ask him. And you're like, what is she going to ask him? Like I don't know if it was supposed to be kind of risque or you just don't know what she's going to ask him. And finally, the last cell of the little cartoon, she's asking him for his old ties to make a crazy patch quilt. And so I get that like women were harassing their loved ones for
Mhm.
fabric, particularly silk, and ties would have been a great source of silk. But yeah, the thought of writing somebody famous and like who was famous in the 1880s that you could get their address. I mean,
Well, just picture though, could you imagine like writing to like Buckingham Palace to ask Queen Victoria for like a piece of her dress? Like
for the White House, I guess. Who was president in 1880? I don't even know. Um, but yeah,
but
I'm
there
picturing
were
like,
there were film stars and
well,
there were
yeah. I mean, I'm picturing
celebrities.
people. Who was the woman who was like the singer? I want to say she was Scandinavian. Clara something, maybe. Oh gosh, I can't think of who she was. But I want to say she was probably around this time. So maybe she was somebody like she came and sang opera in their town and can I have your autograph and some of the hem of your dress?
Yeah, you just
I've got
walk
my
over like I've actually
scissors.
got scissors right here. Can I have your autograph? Okay, while you're signing that, don't mind me.
Oh, and can I just have a snippet of your hair too?
Yeah. That actually would probably feel less weird because they did that. But,
Well, but there was actually a quilt project where people there was so there's all these mending projects out there, there's people that literally off the street and there's a person that'll mend. But I have seen there's a quilt project and I haven't looked at it in a long time, but they would set up shop in different places and ask people for a piece of their clothing to put in the quilt. And people would do it. People would be like, all right, and take their shirt off and they like hack a chunk out of like the middle of the back of the shirt. And it was like an immense quilt, and I cannot remember the details about it, but I just remember thinking it was the weirdest thing. And I don't know, Quilt Folk or somebody might have done a piece about it. But I remember in the pictures there was like the guy walking away with like this diamond shaped piece cut out of the back of his shirt or something. Um, then yeah, so
Hmm.
it's weird, but people will do it, I guess.
I mean, if someone asked me today, if someone were like, can I have it to be, and I'll be like, you want a piece of this fast fashion, like junk clothing we buy now? Okay, here you go. Here, take the whole thing. Like,
Yeah.
like this isn't quality made now.
So two other things on page 160 that I thought were fun. So the one that said a few quilts contain more than 1,000 signatures.
Oh my God, I
So
saw that.
there is one of Dr. Dutton's papers article that he'd written. I mean, it's like 20 pages, like typewritten. But what it is there's like one page is about the quilt itself. It's called the missionary quilt. So the one page is about the quilt itself, and then the other 19 pages are just listings of all the names on the quilt. And they're like double spaced and everything. So but I would guess that there's hundreds of names. So when I see this 1,000 signatures is really not out of the realm, depending on some of these. And and even talking about the Dutch doll quilt, my guess is each woman got a block or had to make a block. And you could see some of them have like so many names, whereas some don't have as many. So I think that's also, sometimes the women were competing with each other to see who could get the most names.
Sometimes I'm sure there was a lot
I'm
of times
sure it
that
was all the
people were
time,
competing.
but yeah.
Well, I mean, I would consider it almost to be like the current concept of, Girl Scouts and selling cookies
Yeah. Yeah, selling cookies,
and
yeah.
how competitive I mean, let's be honest here, it's the moms, like how competitive some of those moms get. There's a Dunkin' Donuts that they often will set up at, which it's kind of dangerous. They'll set up on the sidewalk, but the drive-through comes by right at that sidewalk. And what they'll do, the kids will hang off that sidewalk to like get your attention as you're driving off from the drive-through. Yeah, it's dangerous. Like there's been a couple times I've been like, you guys, like this isn't cool. They'll have a sign that's like stop on it. Like it's kind of like shady. But like sometimes the moms are literally like, you got coffee, you're gonna buy cookies. Like
Yeah. What if I have a dozen donuts? Why do I want cookies too?
I
I
know
mean,
it's an
cookies.
odd place to set up. I don't know why. I don't know how that all came about, but it's like, are you guys trying to then be the cookie drive-through? Because like I might be able to get on board with that. Like
Yeah,
usually they're
I mean, I
hitting up
guess the
outside the
people,
grocery store, but
yeah, I mean, I guess the people that know that they're going to be there, and the fact that Dunkin' Donuts is okay with them doing it, that's surprising. Um, the other thing on this page was the refrigerator quilt
mhm.
because that is so cool. But also, can you imagine having a refrigerator that runs on kerosene? Like, what?
Yeah.
A kerosene heater is bad enough. I can't even imagine like what that is like, a kerosene
Hmm.
refrigerator. I didn't even know if such a thing existed.
I mean, I guess it would be the same as like houses that run on propane gas.
Yeah. I mean, I have gas lines that come into my house for my hot water heater and my oven and stuff. I mean, that's not propane, but that's sort of different. The utility company has handled all of that and they're just piping it into your home. I suspect, let's
Oh,
see,
no, no, I'm talking about homes that have a propane tank outside.
yeah, okay, it's still a tank. I mean, I'm just looking at this. So this is 1935, 1937. They collect the money. They went to Africa, so Nigeria as missionaries. So you can imagine in the 1930s, I'm guessing that's why there was not electricity reliable there. But I mean, I don't know. Like, if you just get a jug of kerosene and you pour it in some kind
Yeah,
of
well, I mean, it even said it covered the freight to get the refrigerator over there. Like, I would have
yeah,
been like,
yeah.
just get yourself a, I don't know, a big cooler or something. Like, that seems like an awful lot of work for a refrigerator.
But if you're going to be there a while, I mean, Nigeria just in the 1930s doesn't strike me as the kind of place where you're going to get ice in a cooler. I mean,
But
the
also, what are you
United
going to go get
States
that
of
needs
the
to be
30s.
refrigerated? Like, they're not going to the supermarket. They're not going to, I don't know, ShopRite or whatever.
Oh, giraffe steaks? I don't know. Maybe maybe one of them was diabetic. They had to refrigerate their insulin. I don't know.
I mean, that would actually make a lot of sense at that point.
Um, so the other one that I thought was really interesting that I kind of glossed over it as I was reading, but the woman pieced a block. So this was the Methodist women's groups in Kansas and Oklahoma. Each woman pieced a block, choosing her own pattern, and she paid a penny for each pattern piece. The woman whose block contained the most pieces won the quilt. So, like, obviously, nobody's doing a 4-patch for their block. I'm like very curious to know what these blocks possibly could look like. I mean, because if I was wanting the quilt, I would certainly put a lot of effort into itty bitty tiny piecing, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Micro piecing of a quilt block.
For real.
But yeah, running through the prices, what I'm remembering from that redwork quilt, there I remember just vividly remember $4.50 or $4.25 being stitched on that quilt. So, looking through here, it was really not until like the 40s and 50s where you might see that kind of dollar amount. So I'm wondering if, that wasn't a particularly old quilt. It was in really good shape, so I suspect it probably wasn't super old. But they talk about the quilt blocks, $18 each in 1882. That's a lot of money.
Hmm.
They're asked the members, and that's a Baptist church, asked to buy blocks for a minimum of $18. That was a lot of money then.
Well, it also lets you know kind of um that they're really kind of only engaging with the upper classes
Mhm.
for that fundraiser.
Yeah, yeah. Whereas these name quilts could be, 25 cents, 20 cents.
Which even still, you're probably at that point engaging mostly with the middle class.
Well, there was somewhere in here I saw that the lowest amount was 2 cents.
Yeah, so those are the ones that I mean, like you can tell based on kind of what they're asking for, like what part of the population is their target.
Yeah.
Especially, and also like some of the ones that like um on page 159, that blue and white where you can see some of the blocks there have the dollar amount. Like, talk about some grandstanding there. Like, I want
Well,
everyone to
yeah.
know how much I
Well, I
donated.
mean, this is like tithing, but publicly tithing, you
Mhm.
know? I mean, I
Well, I
remember,
mean, at one point there the other names for them: charity quilts, subscription quilts, tithing quilts, Bedelman quilts. I've never
I
heard
think
that
it's
one.
Beetleman. I think it's
Yeah, it was
Beetleman.
other names for signature fundraising quilts.
Yes. But I mean, think about it, like, my church experience would be around what my grandparents did, but they tithed as per instruction every Sunday. I remember I would be, that I went to church with them. I'd sit between them and I'd hold the envelope until the tray came by. And it was something like, it's supposed to be 10% of your salary is the rule of thumb. I have no idea what was in that envelope. I'm pretty sure it was a check, but I don't know what was in that envelope, and nobody else did, except it was between my grandparents and the church. But these quilts were like putting it on display, right? Everybody
Mhm.
could see. Oh, you went for the 25 cents. You didn't go for the dollar to have your name in the middle, huh? You know? I mean, I can definitely see that kind of like snooty church lady attitude
Oh
toward
yeah, like, oh my
people.
God, did you see that Becky only gave $1? I gave 5.
Yeah. Or look at my Dutch doll block compared to Esther's.
Mhm.
She only seemed to have been able to get 8 people to sign hers. I got 125.
Well, I mean, to a certain extent, I guess when you got them like this, where everybody's kind of competing with signatures, it's semi-popularity contest.
It is, yeah. I mean, if you've got the same population that especially if it's a small community, I can see, you know, the really the pushy church ladies are getting people onto their blocks versus, the people that maybe don't have as many friends.
Well, you got one block in that Dutch Girls that only has like 10 signatures
hmm
compared to a couple of the other blocks that probably have like 50.
hmm
Yeah, it's that reminds me too that I have the pictures of the signature quilts from the New England Quilt Museum. That exhibition just came down last Saturday. I do have full permission to share them here for people to look at. We just need to decide when we want to do that. Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
yep. When might we want to do that?
Hmm. Well, I mean, could always be on KTV.
I wish we could get your thing figured out to dual stream.
Ah, the Mary McElwain thing is a PDF on the Quilt Index. I should have known that it would be there.
Hi, Arlene. Is this a
Yeah.
first time chat for you? I don't know that I've seen you before. Thank you so much.
Yeah. I always forget about the Quilt Index, and then I'll be looking for something, and I'll just like, the Quilt Index.
I forget about it too, just because it's not fun to use.
Yeah, it's the searching for the ephemera sometimes is a challenge.
But
Yeah.
yes, I agree. I often forget about it. So then, I guess presumably we can think about doing that for Thursday.
Perhaps.
Um, well then, especially if we get like the dual stream figured out by then,
Yeah, yeah, I could work on it.
we could figure that out. We could figure that out.
Oh, yay! You found us last night. Awesome. We are so happy to have you here.
Yeah, thank you so much. There's been 9 new members in the last day because Dawn had shared that she um is going to be doing her book with us for anyone that came in late, our next book, which the first assignment will be given out next week. So
Yeah.
if you're not here live for that, it's out right after the stream. It'll be posted on Instagram and the Facebook group, which for people that don't think about the Facebook group, we've got over 100 followers on Instagram, only about 23 on Facebook. The reason we made the Facebook group because on Instagram we can interact with you and post things for you, but you can only have the comments. So the reason we made the Facebook group is so that you guys can post stuff that you find or that you want to talk about. So remember that and go over there. We do get, Susan Michael posts quite a few interesting things on there that she finds, articles. And oh good, Arlene, I'm so glad that you came from Dawn's post. So please make sure you're joining that group so that you guys have a place that you can talk about stuff, because it's not just about what Steph and I want to talk about at you. Please do join in the conversation. It makes things fun. And also we can share stuff that you find that's really cool that, you know,
Mhm.
not everybody sees.
Yeah, when we got into that, and it's been a few weeks ago, but we got into that whole thing about the bed rugs.
Yeah.
And our dear friend Barb shared some really good intel, and Tish also found some really interesting information on bed rugs.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you guys, yeah, and I say this on my stream a lot. You guys often know more than I do, so it's a really good thing. Like this is all very, it's a community. It takes a village to learn us. So
No, absolutely. I mean, isn't that the whole point of doing all this, is
yeah.
to share all the knowledge, and then we pull in these really cool people that have been doing this a long time and have all this cool knowledge to then geek out with them and share for the world.
Yeah.
So as we wind down here, because we're quite a bit
Yeah.
over time, just a reminder, next week, oh my God, we're already into April. We're
Oh,
April 2nd,
I
and
know.
we are finishing we've got part 6, which finishes this book for us, which is the Shifting Functions Quilt Makers in the 20th Century. So get to read in that. If you don't have the next book, the Antique American Needlework Tools by Dawn Ronnigen, she sells it on Etsy. She's collector WA Needle, and she will get you an autograph copy, and we definitely encourage you to support an author that you can support, because a lot of these books we've got to get secondhand anyways, because we can't even get them new. So when we can support things, we want to be supporting things.
Yeah, for sure.
Anything from you, Steph?
Well, I do stream on Mondays and Thursdays at 2 p.m. Eastern time on Twitch, and it's twitch.tv/Stephanie Cake. It's pretty easy to find.
And then it
Um,
looks like
yeah.
potentially we might be looking at some quilts together on there on Thursday. We will have to
Perhaps.
iron that out and let everyone know.
Yeah, and so we can post that on the Instagram and the Facebook
Mhm,
page so that you'll know.
mhm,
And I'll post it on mine too. So
mhm.
we're gonna do that.
I think that's going to do it for us.
Yeah.
I'm
This is
sad. I'm
yeah,
sad.
it's amazing how fast an hour goes. And I mean, I know we
Mhm.
we chit chat a little bit at the beginning, but yeah, it's amazing how fast an hour goes.
No, and these were good articles.
Definitely.
I
Very good.
definitely enjoyed
Yeah.
them. Well, everybody, thank you so much for joining in and chatting and reading and being here and supporting us. Like
We
this
very
is
much
so much
appreciate it.
this
And
is so
yeah.
much fun.
I mean, we could certainly talk to each other about this stuff, but we like talking to all of you too. It's nice to have our people here.
Yes, absolutely. All right, guys. We'll see you next time.